Hello everyone, it's Annie, and today I am here to do my June wrap-up. I read 18 books this June, and I participated in 2 readathons. One is the Studio Ghibli readathon, which was so much fun. I read primarily for The Wind Rises. And the second was the Queer Lit Readathon, of course, because it's Pride Month, or it was, and both of them were so much fun. And I will start by talking about the books I read for the Studio Ghibli Readathon. So first, I read Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno. I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. I did this for the Wind Rises prompts, a book featuring flight and a book featuring romance, I believe. And this book is a sapphic, contemporary magical realism story, obviously featuring a central sapphic romance, but the book is so much more than that. It deals with some heavy themes and has really interesting relationships among all of the characters. And basically it is about this girl and her twin sister living on a remote island where this mysterious bird comes to roost every summer. So her and her family run a motel that is basically gets all its business from these bird people who come to record and take pictures of the bird. And I think that's so fun in and of itself, but there is a magical element to it because this girl's family is a family of witches. I love it so much. I love that combination. I loved this book so much. I wish I had written it. I loved it. I have nothing bad to say about it. I want to read it again, and I will absolutely be reading more from Katrina Leno in the very near future. And then for the prompt, a colorful cover, I read We Have Always Been Here, a queer Muslim memoir. This I also gave 5 stars. I couldn't really justify not doing that. It was very informative and a really, really interesting memoir. She writes very, very well, and obviously, she's a journalist. And it was just really interesting to read about a subject I knew nothing about, honestly. I really did not know much about how queer people in general were treated by the Muslim population, depending on where they live and what sect of the religion that they are. And there's all these things that I didn't know anything about, and I learned so much from this book. It's a very short read, but a very powerful one, and I highly recommend it. I also applied this book to the 3 prompts of the Queer Lit Readathon, which was religion, a memoir, and a underrepresented identity, I'm pretty sure. So this book took care of a lot this month, but I am so glad I finally read it because it had been on my TBR for quite some time. So let's talk about the books now that I just read for the Queer Lit Readathon. The first one I'm going to say is The Lost Arabs. This is a poetry collection, so I read it for the prompt shorter than a novel. And this was on my TBR for a few months, and I'm glad I finally read it. I don't read much poetry, and I liked this one in general. It had some really, really powerful poems, and the poetry itself, like the writing, was beautiful. However, there were some poems that just either didn't resonate with me or I felt were much, much weaker than some of the more stronger ones. And this is not just a poetry collection, it also seems to be kind of a memoir told in verse. So for that reason, I did not give it any star rating. And if you are a fan of poetry, or again, this is about a queer man, a Muslim queer man, so if you'd like to learn more about that in maybe a more artistic way than just an outright memoir, then I definitely recommend this poetry collection for you. And now I'm going to talk about probably the most surprising book that I read this month because I did not expect to like it as much as I did. It is Dreadnought by April Daniels. I love this, it was so good. I read it for the prompt, a superhero book for the Queer Lit Readathon, and you guys drop everything and read it. Go read it. This has been on my TBR since it came out, or before it came out, many years ago. I think it came out in 2016 or something along those lines. It has been too long. I should have read it before this because it is amazing. It follows this main character named Danny, who is a trans girl, and she meets this very famous superhero called Dreadnought as he is dying in the street, and he picks her to carry the mantle of Dreadnought and his powers. So she gets his powers, but she also gets transformed into the ideal body that she thinks she should be. So of course that complicates things because her family still thinks that she is a boy and she doesn't think that they will accept her, and it complicates things at school. And it also is very interesting how the author deals with her having acceptance from some people and some people don't, for a variety of different reasons. Like, there is a TERF character, which is interesting. There is a best friend character who turns out to be not so great, which is very, very interesting. And I love one of the side characters so much. She's awesome. I think this book was amazing. It had a really great balance between Danny and her personality and the fact that she's trans, and the superhero part of the story was also really well fleshed out and developed. I loved all the other superheroes as well. I thought they were so interesting. It was kind of a Justice League type situation, but it felt so unique. And like, I love superhero comics, although I haven't read any in a very long time, but this just brought back so many good memories of that. And seriously, I have nothing bad to say about this book. You need to read it now. And then I read Fortune Favors the Dead, which is for the vintage prompt, and I think a couple more. I don't remember what I applied it to, but this book is kind of a different spin on the hard-boiled detective story that usually features a man as the detective and all of that stuff that I don't care about. This book I ended up giving 3 stars, which was kind of disappointing because I've heard such great things about it from some other booktubers who I tend to trust, and I didn't hate it, not at all. I did like it. Gave it 3 stars. That's not a bad rating, but it just didn't grab me. There was nothing like inherently wrong with it or that offended me or anything, and I think it was great that we had a main bisexual character. Will was great. I loved her character so much, but for me, it wasn't quite enough to have her as a great character because the mystery itself, which is like the whole plot of the book, just wasn't interesting to me. It involved like fortune tellers and a rich family whose matriarch has died and they're trying to figure out what went wrong, and I just wasn't interested in it that much. But I did really enjoy the historical aspect of it. This takes place in the 1940s, and seeing Will try to navigate that era, it takes place in New York as well, which was interesting. And seeing Will try to navigate that era as a bisexual woman was very, very interesting. And yeah, I liked it. If you're interested in a historical mystery, you would probably definitely like this. I am learning that I don't really like detective stories no matter who the detective is. So that's unfortunate for me, but I think you guys would probably enjoy this regardless. And then I read Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I liked it. I don't know, maybe it was too YA for me, if that's possible. I don't know. There was just some things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, okay, so Darius is a depressed teen with anxiety, and he is half Persian, or a fractional Persian as he calls himself, and he one summer is taken to Iran to visit his sick grandfather and his family on his mother's side back in Iran. And I absolutely loved that aspect of the book. I loved seeing Darius meet his family there and feeling like he belongs with them while also having some complicated feelings about having lived in America, not speaking Farsi, and it was a really, really interesting part of the book. I loved that so much. And while he is there, he meets this boy who he becomes really close with really quickly, and I liked this guy. However, he was probably the reason why I had a little bit of a problem with the book, because throughout the whole book, he is like portrayed as this perfect, super understanding guy, like way more understanding than anyone I've met has been, to be honest. And he is so amazing and such a good friend. And then at the end, I'm not going to say why because it's a spoiler, but at the end, he just does something really mean to Darius. And I know that he technically had a reason, but it just seemed too out of character, if that makes sense. Like, it made sense for him to act out of character, but it just seemed like too big of a jolt. Like, it seemed like it was for the shock factor, and it wasn't quite realistic enough for me. And also, I had a little bit of an issue with the father character. Darius is depressed, and his father is also depressed. But you would think that means that his father would understand him a little bit more, but he doesn't. For me, it just didn't make sense how he treated Darius and made him feel bad for being depressed when he also knew how being depressed felt. It just didn't make sense to me. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that fits someone else's experience with being depressed. I'm not sure. But regardless, I did really like the story. And also, he talked about hobbits and Star Trek way too much. I'm sorry. I love Tolkien and I love Star Trek, but Darius, come on, guys. Like, you gotta stop with that. But regardless, I thought it was a really good book. It was very, very important, and I loved the amount of family love that we get to see. I absolutely loved the family that Darius meets in Iran. They are so precious, and I love them. And I do recommend this book if you're looking for a really nice, hard-hitting YA contemporary. Okay, so those are all the books I read for the Queer Lit Readathon. Again, it was so much fun, and I am so glad that I participated. So let's get into the new releases that I read this month. First, we have The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nivo. She wrote the amazing Empress of Salt and Fortune. I love those novellas so much. They own my heart. But sadly, this book was a bit of a disappointment. I don't know, I just felt like it should have been longer. It was quite short, under 300 pages, and I feel like the magic was kind of strange. It didn't super fit into the story, and while I liked the elements that were there, it felt just kind of odd and like a strange kind of throwaway thing. But I feel like if the book were longer, she could have dissected that magic a little bit more, given us just a tiny bit more world building about that, and it would have made a whole lot more sense. However, I loved the reimagining of the character Jordan Baker in this retelling. She is from Vietnam, and it kind of examines her feelings about being Asian and queer in the 1920s in America, surrounded by white people who kind of treat her as an exotic, mantelpiece instead of a person, and it was very, very interesting to see that. Her relationship with Daisy was also super interesting, and honestly, I think if you like The Great Gatsby, you should still read this. I did enjoy it. I gave it 3 stars. But I also think there was a bit of a problem with my expectations being too high because I loved her novella series, but I don't know. I think I expected too much from this book. It's also an adult book, but there's just so much sex in it, like that I feel like those pages could have been given to maybe fleshing out the magic system a little bit instead of describing Jordan and Nick having sex for like the 5th time. Like, okay, we know that. So maybe do something else. Like, I don't know. It was interesting. Definitely a very unique interpretation of The Great Gatsby story, and I think worth a read. And then I read an arc of 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim, which is not out yet, but it's basically out. It's coming out the first week of July, so I'm counting it here. And I also gave this 3 stars. Kind of a mediocre month, although I did have some really good reads intermixed, but this book was a YA fantasy retelling of the Seven Swans folktale, and it was an interesting world. I think the world building was the most successful part of the book, but I just felt like everything else wasn't successful. The plot was weirdly paced, and really weirdly paced. Like, things that you would expect the author to really focus on were just, like, glossed over, or they happened super quickly, and you're like, wait, how did we get from there to here so fast? And her brothers, the main character's brothers, which have been turned into 6 cranes that she has to break the curse that her stepmother put on them. That's the plot of the book. Her brothers, we don't get to know at all. And I felt like that really detracted from the story because the main character cares about them so much, but we don't really understand why. I mean, yeah, they're her brothers, but none of them have a unique personality, and they all just kind of blend together, and I wish that we had gotten more of that. I don't know. It was fine. It was fine for YA fantasy. Again, that's not really my jam unless it's an anomaly. So I didn't expect this to be a 5-star. So I guess, I got what I expected. It wasn't terrible. Absolutely not. It was definitely good. And if you're interested in a YA fantasy inspired by East Asian settings, then I would recommend you read this. But to be honest, I don't think I would read anything else by Elizabeth Lim, unfortunately. And then we have a 4.5-star read. It was so good. Honestly, I might bump it up to a 5. I don't know. It is Ophi's Ghost. I love this. It was a middle grade historical fiction. You guys know that's one of my favorite genres ever. This follows Ophi, who is a young black girl in the 1920s, I believe, and her father is killed coming home from voting one night, so she and her mother need to go up north and try and start their lives again without her father. So it definitely, from the get-go, deals with super heavy themes, and I just loved it. I loved this book because in addition to being a really well-researched and well-written historical fiction book, it also has some paranormal elements because Ophi is special in that she can see ghosts. And she meets a ghost one day who is very special when she is working at a rich family's home as a maid, and she kind of befriends this ghost and she needs to help her get closure so she can pass on. And the mystery of this book was so engaging. I loved Ophi so much, and I think it was beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous middle grade. If you're looking for any middle grade, please pick this up because I feel like it's super underrated. Like, I just found this randomly on Goodreads. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it on Booktube yet, so please don't wait. Add this to your TBR because it is so good. And now I'm briefly going to talk about the 3 books I read for my secret TBR vlog, which is not out yet, but it will be out very soon, so please look forward to it. It is The Priory of the Orange Tree, Challenger Deep, and A Girl is a Body of Water. These 3 books I read for a special theme that I won't tell you about. But I am very glad that I read all of these. All of them have been on my TBR for a while. I'm glad I finally tackled The Priory because, gosh, it's long. But I'm very happy I finally read this sapphic classic. And it was good. It was really good. So please definitely check out my thoughts in that vlog when it comes out. I will have it linked up there when it is out. And I just to tell you, like, my reviews are all pretty positive for these books, so definitely if you're interested in any of them more deeply, please check it out. So now I have 5 more books to talk about. They're all kind of just random reads that I decided to pick up, mostly mood reading. The first one is another historical fiction middle grade, which is Prairie Lotus. First of all, please take a moment to admire this cover. Stunning. Second, let me tell you a bit about this book. It is about a girl who is half Chinese and half white who is traveling to the Midwest with her father, who is white, after her mother has died. And they used to live in Los Angeles, Now they are living somewhere where I don't remember, but one of the states in the middle down there that is not very developed yet. And it is so good. It also deals with some incredibly heavy themes, a bit of a warning for sexual assault, obviously racism, because that is the main theme of the book, how the main character is treated by the people around her when all she wants to do is graduate and get her diploma, and the people around her just try and stop her every step of the way. And it is really difficult to read because it made me so angry, and I just felt so much for this main character and all the hardship that she goes through. And it also has a really interesting dynamic between the main character and her treatment that she suffers and the treatment of the Native Americans that she meets while she's traveling with her father and kind of befriends, and her feelings on how both of them are treated by the white people around them. And it is such a well-written book. Honestly, this book is so good. This was absolutely a 5-star book. It was stunning and also surprisingly underrated. So please read this book. It is so good. This historical fiction middle grade needs more love. And then, because the Tokyo Olympics are right around the corner, I decided to read Simone Weil's memoir, Courage to Soar. I loved this book, gave it 5 stars. I mean, it's a memoir, how could I not? I really enjoyed learning about Simone as a person. I did not know that she was in the foster care system. I didn't know that she has ADHD. I already admired her because she's an amazing superhuman, but I really grew to admire her even more after reading her memoir, and I can't wait to see her compete in the Tokyo Olympics. I am really hoping that she wins another gold because, gosh, she deserves it so much. And if you're interested in sports memoirs at all, definitely check this out. This is not one to miss. Okay, 3 more. They are all very famous sapphic reads, so I'm gonna be really excited. Just bear with me. The first one is a memory called Empire. I love this! It's the first book in the Teixkalan duology. It is a very political space opera. I love this. This is my new favorite book. I love it. If I could give it 1,000,000,000 stars, I would. This is my new favorite book since 2013 when Ancillary Justice came out. This book is everything I have ever wanted. It is my personality within the binding. I love it so much. Oh my god, I love the main character. She is so cool and interesting and does not suffer at all from the boring blank slate main character syndrome. I love the Teixkalanli alien culture that she gets immersed in. I absolutely love that. I love the politics surrounding that because it is an empire that conquers other planets, but they're also, they have really interesting poetry and interesting culture, and I love this book. It's so good. It also has a central murder mystery as the central plot point, so that is what the main character is trying to figure out, and gosh, I love this book. I cannot give it any higher praise. I can't. I love it, and I am going to read the second one really soon. I bought it, so watch out for that in my birthday book haul coming up, and God, I am so excited. I'm so excited to read it. And then we have one that was a little bit of a disappointment. It was The Midnight Lie. I didn't know what to expect when I picked this up, but I didn't get what I was expecting. I didn't like any of the characters, and that was disappointing. The main sapphic romance was fine. I mean, I was just glad it was sapphic, because if it wasn't, this book probably would have been like a 1.5 instead of the 2.75 I gave it, and I rounded it up because I'm a very generous person. And I just felt like the world building was strange. After reading it, I learned that this is set in a world that the author has written books in before, which I have not read. And I think that that was a problem, because to me, it just felt like a hodgepodge of ideas that could have been cool, but they didn't really fit together. It just felt like the author threw things up against the wall and just wrote about the things that ended up sticking. And I don't know, it was simultaneously strange and confusing, but also boring and predictable, because the ending was like meant to be a big shock factor, but I mean, if you read the book closely, it was pretty obvious what was going on. So it wasn't a big shock to me. I mean, I don't know. I didn't like the love interest at all as well. She has the type of personality where she like just plays around with people, and she doesn't treat Nareem very well, who's the main character. I don't know. I just didn't like her. But I think what this book did very successfully is explore abuse, physical and emotional. I thought it was really well done between Nareem and basically her adopted mother. I thought it was really, really interesting, and that was a really well-written part of the book, and I don't know. I was expecting more from this, but sadly, it was just average. But to make up for it, the last book I'm talking about was amazing. I gave it 4.5, and it is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. Oh my god, I can't believe I had low expectations for this book, I'm just gonna say. Because it has like the really cliche YA type of title, you know, something of the something something. And it just, I don't know, I didn't know what to expect. But oh my god, this book was so good! From the first moment I started listening to it, I was immediately gripped. I love it. I loved all of the characters. The plot is that this girl named Lei is a peasant girl, and she is chosen to become a paper girl, which is basically a concubine for the king of this vast empire. And there are different castes in this society. There is the paper caste, which is the humans, and then a middle caste, the moon caste, I'm pretty sure, and then the metal caste, which are the demons. And they are so interesting. I love the world building in this. It could have gone down a cliche path, but it didn't. The author did this masterfully, and all of the other concubines that the main character meets when she is brought to the palace are fleshed out. Like, this is an example of good character work when you have a lot of characters in a story. All of them have really distinct personalities. Even if they're very minor characters, I still felt like they had a really unique personality and a unique role in the story. I loved that. I love Lei's love interest. They're so good. I love them. Oh my gosh. And I just loved the theme of girls taking revenge. Again, I mentioned this in my Tropes I Love video. This is one of the things I love the most. And especially sapphic love, you know, triumphing over all this injustice. It was amazing. There is one thing, please be careful. There is a lot of heavy stuff in here. Murder, torture, sexual assault, lots of very heavy things, but it is so worth it. If you're able to read it, please do, because gosh, it is amazing. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I cannot wait. I'm going to read the next book next month. I can't wait for it. I really hope it lives up to the first one, but if it has Lei and Ren in it, I'm sure it will, because gosh, I just love them. I could go on and on about this book, so I'll stop myself there. Thank you guys so much for watching my June wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any opinions about the books I read in June, please share them with me in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about them. And please let me know what your favorite book was you read in June. I'd love to know. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!